Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Allison Sekuler and the President and Chief Scientist at the Baycrest Academy for Research and Education, as well as the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all here today. First, apologies to anybody who joined at 2 o'clock. We appreciate your eagerness. As you can see, we are starting at 2:30. Apologies for that. I want to make sure that I'm also introducing all of our special guests today. We are fortunate to have with us Dr. Adriana Schnall, who is the Program Director of the Kashitsky Center for Innovations in Caregiving at the Baycrest Academy for Research and Education. Teresa Kwok, who is the Communicative Disorders Assistant at Baycrest and also an expert in hearing loss and hearing screening. And we also have Dr. Larissa McKetton, who is the Director of Scientific and Clinical Development at the Baycrest Academy for Research and Education. Before we dive into everything, I would like to make sure that we thank all of our funders, the Slate Family Foundation, Baycrest, CABI, and the Center for Learning, Research, and Innovation in Long-Term Care, this is otherwise known as the CLRI. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar format is that mics should be muted and videos off. And the webinar presentation will be recorded, but not the question and answer session. So we ask that you turn up your volume on your computers, particularly when we're going to share a video with sound, which will happen. And there will be some icons at the bottom of the screen. CC is if you would like to have closed captions. Chat is if you need technical assistance. And Q&A is for any questions. And we ask that if you've got questions, please use the Q&A for that. So we're able to make sure that we can see all of the questions and also so we can keep the chat free for the technical assistance. We'll have some designated time for Q&A at the end of the presentations. So just to restate the objectives for today, we are going to be identifying and addressing caregivers' needs during care transitions. We want to make sure that you, I'm seeing a problem with the image. I'm not sure if other people see that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll appreciate that, have you appreciate that individuals' dementia risk is modifiable. We will identify proactive measures that caregivers can take to reduce their dementia risk. And we also will hope that you can become familiar with resources and tools to support caregiver well-being. I see that there is a raised hand. I wonder if that person can perhaps type into the chat any sort of question that they might have. Thanks. So the agenda for today is talking a little bit about the caregiver experience, long-term care transitions, and caregiver resources. We will review the definition of what is dementia, and we'll speak to the dementia, Defy Dementia series that we have and share some actions that you can take to reduce your risk. We'll also show you a couple of tools that you can use to both assess and reduce your dementia risk. We'll take a short body break, and then we will have a question and answer and a wrap up. So just in terms of what is dementia, I'm asked this question all the time. People are often really familiar with a term called Alzheimer's, and they think that Alzheimer's is dementia. Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body, frontotemporal, those are all different sorts of diseases, neurological diseases that people may have. And when somebody's ability to perform everyday activities in the world is really disrupted by these, and their cognitive functions and so on are really disrupted, then those diseases are termed dementia. So dementia is really an umbrella term. It's a general term that describes a collection of these different kinds of symptoms. Memory loss is the one that people often think about, but one of the things that's really important to recognize is that dementia can affect more than just your memory. It also can affect your language, it can affect your emotion, it can affect your perception, it can affect your movement. So memory is one of the sort of symptoms, and it's often the one that we sort of see the most visibly, but there are other elements of dementia. And right now, dementia in one form or another affects about 50 million people worldwide and about 750,000 just in Canada alone. And Alzheimer's is the most prevalent type of dementia, but the others account for 5 to 10% of the cases. But what's really interesting is that very often people will have more than one of these. So what we call mixed pathology, which means you've got not just one of these, but you might have Alzheimer's and frontotemporal dementia, or Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. The combinations are actually quite common. So that's a general overview about what is dementia. And I want to now turn it over to my colleague Adriana, who's going to talk a little bit about caregiver experience at the point of transition to long-term care. So Adriana, over to you.
Thanks so much, Allison. And I wanted to talk a bit about what it's like for family members when the person they're caring for transitions into long-term care. And long-term care in different parts of Canada is called different things. We used to call it nursing home. Some people call it institutional care. It doesn't matter. The point being is that it's the transition when families decide that they can't manage the person at home or in the community anymore. And this is a time that's fraught with emotions for people. And a lot of people will say to a family member, well, look at you. It's time to party, to go traveling. Now you're free. You don't have to look after the person you were looking after for so many years. And nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, it is true that at night you don't have to worry about the person perhaps wandering, but you still worry for different reasons. The other piece of it to remember is that by the time somebody transitions to long-term care, families have been dealing with this, sometimes up to 10, 15, 20 years, because the journeys and the progressions are so different for different people. And so depending where you live, also the process of admission to long-term care looks very different. In Ontario, out of nowhere, it seems to families, they get a call from the Ontario Health at Home teams, and they say there's a bed for your relative tomorrow, after 2.5 years perhaps of being on a waiting list. So it feels that all of a sudden you have to say yes or no without thinking it through. And so when people get a call to say there's a bed, it's a mix of emotions. A lot of people feel this tremendous guilt, especially if something happened the week before where things were a bit easier and you were thinking, well, maybe I could manage at home. It's not so bad. And now if you say no in our system, you say no, you're off the list. And so you have to very quickly decide what you're going to do. People feel grief. It's especially for couples. This may be the first separation after 30, 40, 50 years of marriage, perhaps. And nobody acknowledges that it's a separation for the couple, but it is. And the person, the caregiver staying in the community, there's this loneliness that happens. And then there's the piece about worrying about now, after providing care for your family member, you got to entrust the facility to do a good job. And the truth is, they may do a good job and they do overall a good job, but it's not one-on-one care. And so you have to relinquish that control and start trusting the institution. And as it happens sometimes is the person, your family member, they're in, a month later, they have a fall, fracture a hip, and you go into a spin like, I knew it, I shouldn't have placed him. Look what happened to him now. They're not looking after him properly. And these are very common feelings. And the truth is people go into long-term care at the end of their illness and their lives. People don't go in the early stages of dementia or even moderate. And so things are going to happen. And because of all of these reasons, we know that it takes a good 6 weeks to 3 months for people to, not just for the resident, but for the families and for staff to adjust to the admission. The other piece is we always have some neighbor, some cousin, somebody saying, why did you place so-and-so? They're fine, there's nothing wrong with them. And so that constantly eats at you thinking, did I make the right decision? Especially in certain cultures where families are expected to look after their family members. It becomes very difficult when somebody has to make the decision to place somebody. And people in Canada come from all over the world, but all over the world, there's different contexts. We have families here that come without many supports. They may sponsor the parent. There's no other siblings. And people here, the caregivers, have to work full time, 1 or 2 jobs, and nobody can look after the person. So it's difficult when we hear judgment from others. And admission to long-term care, even though we may have chosen to make an application, is not the choice that most people, the person with dementia or ourselves, would want. So all of these things make for a really difficult transition. And the other piece, to top it all off, there's financial implications to long-term care because it's not free. Even though in Canada, long-term care is geared to income, the problem is that, for example, if you have a couple and one's still staying at home and one has to go into long-term care, now you have to make do with pretty much the same amount of money and support 2 people separately. We do have something called, because of separation, old age pension, CPP, that they give different amounts of money, but overall, it's a financial strain. Next slide, please. So we know that this is a difficult time, and yet in most long-term care facilities, and the way we view things is once you caregiver, place your person, you're free to go and you don't have stress. And we don't put clinical supports or any type of psychosocial supports for that person, even though we may know that they're suffering. And so we developed an assessment tool at Baycrest that can identify the needs of the caregiver during these times of transitions to long-term care. The reason for this is because if we don't know what the issues are for the family member, we as healthcare professionals, it's very difficult to help or know where to put the help. And the other piece is we don't like to look at the caregiver and the resident as 2 separate entities. They're part of a dyad. And so it's on us, healthcare professionals, to support the resident that comes in and the family try to adjust and understand that they're going through a hard time. Really, this is something, though, that even though people that are at the bedside, people that provide care know this, our models of funding from the government are not geared to putting in supports for family members. And so this creates a bit of a tension for families because they feel that they're not getting what they need, they're not getting their needs met. And for staff, for example, most long-term care facilities only have to have access to 1 social worker per long-term care facility. Baker's is different, but that's what the government funds long-term care facilities for. You tell me how 1 social worker can provide support to all the residents plus all the families. Impossible. So because of that, we realize that, and especially if you live in rural areas, there are not even any social workers associated with long-term care facilities. So where are people supposed to get help? And the next slide, please. We developed, we call it CCARD, is the Canadian Caregiver Assessment and Resources Tool. And one of the ways that this took, it's for all caregivers of all types of illnesses throughout Canada. Having said that, there is a way we could use this tool to support those family members of people in long-term care. And I'm just gonna go, it's a series of 15 questions that leads you to resources. And Kat, if you can, so no, that's not the beginning. If we can go to the beginning, slide, yeah. So it requires a few things like what is the age of the person? So it's the person's 65, over 65. If you can, so if you can
Kat, can you
click
click,
on,
click when she says something so
click
it
when I
gets
say
entered in?
something. So I say, what is the age of, there, 65 and over. What setting does the person, what is their relationship? I'm the daughter. What setting, say long-term care, nursing home? Which province?
And sorry,
Ontario.
just to interrupt, there was a question about whether these resources also work for people going into retirement homes, and that is one of those
Absolutely.
options. Yeah.
Absolutely. Which does the person live rural or urban? Urban. No, he's not a veteran. No, not Indigenous. The issues are depression and dementia. And what would I like information? Advanced care planning is second. Transitioning into a different living situation, and maybe caregiver support groups. And select all that applies. So what are some barriers? I don't know where to get help. Number one, ensure where to find professional help. And there's long waiting lists. And then please select all that apply. I go to my family doctor for help. I rarely engage in self-care activities. And this is to check my mood. So several days I have little interest or pleasure in doing things. Several days I'm feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. My finances, sometimes I worry about covering my basic necessities. My caregiving responsibilities, yes, they negatively affect. I had to reduce my work hours. And then my age is 55 to 64. I'm not Indigenous. I live in Ontario. I'm Caucasian. I identify as female, a woman. I'm employed. And now this takes me to resources. So the number one place is 211, and just if nothing else, if you can do nothing else, because it's available in over 150 languages, 24/7. It's the most accessible. Then it gives me a list, because I'm in Ontario, of the Ontario Caregiver Organization, which lists all kinds of support groups. Then it links me to different financial resources that may be of help to me. And then it takes me to the medical conditions. I said that the person is depression and has depression and dementia. So I may be interested in learning more about it. There's advanced care planning, what to do if I'm depressed, and then training modules on how to seek help. And you can stop the C card. But those, when you get those, if you click on the link, it will take you to the correct resource. And then you can explore each one of them. And this may be of help for those caregivers whose relative is going into long-term care, has gone to long-term care, dementia, or anything else. especially if you don't have access to a social work or anybody that provides psychosocial supports. And on that note, I'm going to stop because my time is up. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Adriana. One of the things that's really interesting is people who are caregivers for somebody living with dementia can actually be up to 6 times more at risk for developing dementia themselves. And that's not because dementia is contagious, it's because caregivers tend to be less likely to take care of themselves because they're focused on taking care of someone else. And so, they are less able to focus on their diet or exercise, and they're often socially isolated. So, this is one of the sorts of things that we have talked about in our program called Defy Dementia. As you'll see on the next slide, some of the sorts of things that we're trying to do in the Defy Dementia program is really raise people's awareness about things that you can do to reduce your dementia risk. There certainly are some things that can't be changed. Your genetics and your age, for example, but things that you can change and that you can change throughout your entire life. We know that there are quite a lot of these that are what we would call lifestyle factors or related to lifestyle factors. So we know lower education, high blood pressure, drinking quite a lot, obesity, hearing loss, traumatic brain injury, high LDL cholesterol, that's the bad cholesterol, as opposed to HDL, which is the good cholesterol. Things like smoking, depression, social isolation, physical inactivity, air pollution, diabetes, vision loss. These are all risk factors that can be changed or modified. And depending on the life stage, early in life or midlife or later life, some of them are more important earlier or later, but they're all important throughout our entire life course. And what that means is that it's never too late to reduce your risk. The risk factors that are highlighted here are from what we call the Lancet Commission report, which every couple of years updates the risk factors that the world's leading scientists consider to be things that we can modify based on tremendous amounts of research and science. So there certainly are going to be others that will be added to the list in future iterations. It started with 9 and then it went to 12, and the last one that just came out in 2024 had 14, and you'll see the 2 new ones that were added here highlighted in orange, the cholesterol and vision loss. And interestingly, as you'll see on the next slide, when you add up all of the sorts of impact that these risk factors have, is actually 45% of dementia risk worldwide is associated with these modifiable risk factors. So that is a huge, huge ability of control that we may actually have, as opposed to genetics, which is much smaller, a much smaller amount. So when we say that caregivers are 6 times higher, you see, caregiving was not on that list, but as I said before, caregivers are probably up to 6 times more likely to develop dementia, especially spousal caregivers, because they're not taking care of themselves in all of these different kinds of ways. So that's really what Defy Dementia is all about. As you'll see on the next slide, Defy Dementia, and if you can, yeah, thank you. Defy Dementia is a program that we are started in 2022. Is that right? I've lost track of all time. And basically, it includes a couple different components, but the main thing is we want to really make sure that all Canadians understand changes that they can make in their everyday life to be able to reduce their risk for dementia or to slow the progression of the disease if they've already been diagnosed. We initially received funding from the Public Health Agency of Canada to create the Defy Dementia program. And Defy Dementia includes a podcast that Jay Ingram and I co-host, and that is dedicated to reducing your dementia risk. And the kind of things that we talk about on the podcast are exactly these sorts of topics. So we might have one episode on caregiving. In fact, we do, where we talk to somebody who is a caregiver, has been a caregiver, and that person explains their story. What have been the challenges of caregiving? What has been the challenge, we have an upcoming episode where we'll have someone talk about the challenge of making a decision about when to move a loved one into long-term care, for example. And then we have a scientist who can speak to that person's story and can say, what is the impact of whatever this topic is on the brain, and how is it related to dementia? And then critically, what we try to do is to give some basic tips on what you can do to take control of that situation, whether it's exercise or diet or air pollution or caregiving. So in addition to the podcast, we also have some supplementary information for many of the episodes, and we'll be filling in the others as we go, now that we have funding from other groups, including Cabby and Baycrest. So you'll see in some of the episodes things like infographics. So each podcast is about half an hour long, and you can get it either through our website or you can get it on any of the podcast platforms that you might be used to. These sorts of resources you can get at the website, which is defydementia.org. What you'll see here is that for each of the different risk factors that we're talking about, you actually do have infographics, which basically summarize the discussion that we had in the podcast. But it's something that you can print out, hang on your fridge, or you can share it with a friend or a loved one or a colleague. And it has that same sort of format where it'll talk about what is the risk factor, and then what are the steps that you can take to change your likelihood of being impacted by that risk. And we have it both in English and in French, and stay tuned as we hopefully will have other languages coming soon. In addition to the podcast, in addition to the infographics, we also have created short animated videos that summarize each podcast. And let's watch one right now about brain health for caregivers.
It may come as a surprise, but being a caregiver for someone living with dementia is a significant risk factor for developing dementia.
Caregivers are up to 6 times more likely than non-caregivers to develop dementia themselves. Caregiving may lead to more social isolation, less exercise, unhealthy eating, and poor sleep. These factors all increase our dementia risk.
When someone is diagnosed with dementia, someone else becomes a caregiver. But caregiving shouldn't be just one person's job. Family, friends, healthcare professionals, and support groups can all help.
You may be a caregiver someday, so talk to loved ones before there's a diagnosis about their care preferences and legal matters. It may be hard to talk about them after diagnosis.
With support and resources, you can take action early, take care of yourself, and decrease your dementia risk.
So what can you do to reduce your dementia risk? How can you take action? Some of the things, in case it went by too fast in the video, before there's a diagnosis, before there's even a diagnosis, it's really important to talk to people in your circle, in your life, about their care preferences, and yours as well, about money and legal matters. It's important to do that before any sort of disease progresses, just so that you know if something happens, what ought you be doing, and are you prepared? You should also commit to having a healthy lifestyle. Engage in social activities, optimize your sleep and exercise, and eat a healthy diet. And again, we have episodes on every single one of those to help you find your way through these. And then also connect with a caregiver support group. By building a caregiving team that includes family and friends and community and faith groups, healthcare professionals, and adult day programs, you're going to be learning from what everyone else has already gone through, and you also won't feel so alone. I mean, there's rarely a question that I know that any caregiver has asked that no one else has asked or lived. And having that network, that set of shared experiences, you feel like you're part of the community. And I can tell you from experience, you feel a lot less helpless. And the C-Cart tool that you heard about before has some of these tools to help you find these caregiver support groups. So even if you're not thinking about the need for those caregiver support groups and you're checking how to transition into a new living environment or something else, remember, check that little box that says caregiver support groups. I think you'll be really happy that you did. Someone had asked a question about whether we'll be recording this. We're going to be recording it. And so you can refer it to someone else later. Someone else had asked a question about assessment tools to track your dementia. And that's where we're headed right now. We're going to actually show you some tools to be able to help people do this assessment of where they are as soon as possible. So we're going to turn it right now over to Larissa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison. So welcome, everyone. I'd like to talk a little bit more about our free online Cognicity brain health assessment that can be taken on the cognicity.com site. So notice the spelling, it ends with an I, not a Y. So cognicity.com. And you can think of this test as a blood pressure cuff for the brain to help answer the question, is my memory normal, or should I follow up with seeing a doctor if experiencing any memory concerns? So the test is relatively quick. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete, and is meant to be completed in a quiet room on a computer or laptop with no distractions around. And once the test is completed, you'll be provided with a personalized report, which includes a brain health score from 0 to 100 with an interpretation of what that score means and suggested next steps. And anyone can take the test, but it has been validated for the ages 20 to 94, so anyone within that age range will get a report. And during the test, you will answer several questions from a demographic and health questionnaire, and will also complete 4 cognitive tasks. And each of these 4 cognitive tasks were designed to be sensitive to subtle cognitive changes associated with normal aging and mild cognitive impairment. So the first step is when you do go on the cognicity.com site, you can access it on any web browser on a computer or laptop. If it is your first time, you would click on the login button on the very top of the right hand of the screen, and then select create an account. And once you complete that, you will then click on the green icon that you see on the screen that says take the assessment. And then you would read over the test requirements, like giving yourself about 20 minutes to complete the test without being distracted or pausing and checking your phone or emails, being in a quiet room, and also giving it your best effort. So you don't want to take the test when you are feeling anxious or stressed or thinking about other things, or if you are tired or unwell. So when you are, computer ready, then you would click on Begin Assessment on the bottom, and then you would start to fill out the questionnaire, and instructions are provided how to complete the 4 different cognitive tasks for the brain health assessment. And what's nice also about this assessment is that you would complete a practice test for each of the tasks, so you understand what is being asked of you. And once the test is completed, you will get a personalized report that you can print off if needed. And as mentioned, the purpose of this test is for you to learn more about how your memory and attention is functioning, and let you know if you should follow up with a doctor for further assessment if you are experiencing any memory concerns. And what we also have as part of the cognicity.com site is a smart tracker tool. So as was mentioned earlier on in this presentation, we know that certain lifestyle choices may better protect against or delay the onset of dementia. And on the cognicity.com site, the Smart Tracker tool is a 5-minute lifestyle questionnaire. And it is a really great resource because it checks, it tracks your lifestyle choices and provides recommendations on where to improve on next. The questionnaire is very easy to fill out. You would simply enter your current lifestyle habits from the past week and answer questions related to your diet, exercise, cognitive and social engagement, your sleep patterns, and your emotional and physical well-being. And once the 5 minutes are completed, once you take the questionnaire, you get a score. And then under each of those domains, you get a result. And the idea is to go from red to green. So you can track your scores through time. And it's really ideal to maintain and improve your overall health as well as your brain health. So we do recommend to take this smart tracker tool in combination with the brain health assessment every 6 months. And this way you can track, maintain, and ideally optimize your brain health and your overall health.
Thanks, Larissa. And I really want to stress that last point you made about taking this on a regular basis. I mean, we get our eyes checked on a regular basis. You get your teeth checked on a regular basis. Why are we not also getting our brains checked? And this is a free and easy way to do it. And it also gives you a baseline, right? So if something happens, if you slip and fall, hit your head, you have a concussion, whatever, you'll be able to tell how are you compared to how you were, right? So, and often what you'll find is you might be worried about something and you take the test and it's like, oh no, it's the same. So it can actually, it doesn't just identify issues. It can lead to, a sense of relief when you see that, you're functioning as well as possible. It's also, I think, really important to highlight that sometimes, your brain function results may look low here, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's dementia, right? It could be other kinds of things. It could be a vitamin B deficiency, right? My daughter had that. We thought she was having, other sorts of issues like long COVID. It turned out it was vitamin B. So she started taking bigger supplements and now she's fine, right? It can also be depression. It could be lots of different things. Some infections can make it look like you've lost cognitive function. So by taking this test, if you see an issue, it says go see your doctor, and your doctor can check out what the issue is. So Larissa, anything else you want to add on this amazing tool?
No, you captured it perfectly. Again, it's just a breath of fresh air. It could be like a weight that has been lifted off your shoulders if you are concerned with your memory, and it could be again many multiple things, not necessarily mild cognitive impairment or dementia, but it's a great pre-screening tool. So, yeah.
Exactly. And one of the things that, as we said before, can be a risk factor for dementia is hearing. And so I want to bring Teresa up to tell us a little bit about how you can not just check your brain health at home, but now you can also check your hearing at home. So Teresa, over to you.
Thank you, Allison. So yes, as mentioned earlier, untreated hearing loss is one of the leading risk factors that for dementia, and that may be preventable with timely hearing help. So I'm here to talk about Baycrest, a free online screening tool that we have that everyone can access from the comfort of their own home. So all you need is just a device, stable internet connection, a headphone. Over-the-ear headphones would be best, but even if you only have the in-the-ear headphones as well, that would also work. And also ideally a quiet space, as quiet as possible. So it's on a website, so you can access it through, I believe the link will be sent to you later as well, but it can also be found on the Baycrest website. It is not a diagnostic test, but it gives you general information about your hearing health, whether you may have a hearing loss or not, to detect hearing loss and to take actions. So it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, very quick. And yeah, we can go through some of that. So yeah, how it works is you answer a few questions. So there will be some questions about how you or the people around you feel about your hearing, and then to check the hearing as well. So yeah, we can click next. So yeah, here are about 7 to 9 questions about how you describe your hearing in different situations. So let's say like one-on-one conversation, like maybe occasionally, sometimes people seem to mumble. There may be some trouble on the phone. So yeah, maybe occasionally, maybe in a noisy environment, it's pretty hard. Like often there may be trouble. People around me may have suggested I have hearing loss. So yeah, it's how people around us feel as well. And if there is a difference between left and right ear. So we can say, yeah, maybe what if about the same? And let's say I have trouble hearing mostly women and children. And have we thought about getting help with their hearing and taking any actions about it? Yeah, so now that we've done the questions, and then you ideally will be in a quiet space, and then it will just give you instructions to set up the assessment, the quick screening. So how are you connected your headphones? And once you have adjusted the volume as mentioned, then it will start giving you all the audio prompts as well.
drops in the air. The act is
So yeah, so we can just quickly go through like each of the prompts, and then we can go next. And then by
the
the
act is
end
a
of it,
system
it will give you combining the answers to the self-assessment and also these hearing checks. It will give you the result of whether you may have a hearing loss or not. So when we get through all these questions, we will be able to see that like there will be a chart saying that your hearing may be good, there may be a loss or a significant loss. And
light strikes.
so yeah, it will do both left and right ear. So yeah, once it's completed, you'll be able to view the results. And so yeah, this is where it will tell you if you may have good hearing, if you may have a hearing loss. And what's unique about this screening tool is that it gives you an opportunity to connect with a Baycrest audiologist. If you would like a follow-up chat, it comes with a 15-minute complimentary chat. So put in your name, your email, your phone number, and then a Baycrest audiologist can reach out to you to talk about your results and what actions can be taken. And if you want, you can also request an email copy of the result. So it's very simple, very quick, and anyone can access this screening tool here.
Thanks so much, Teresa. One of the things I really love about the tool is people might have noticed, yes, there is a place you can enter your email address and so on, but that's only if you want something emailed to you, or it's only if you want to connect with somebody. So many of these tests, to be able to access it, you have to give away all your information. This, we only ask for your information after you get your results. So you don't actually need to even share any of that with people. And I think that one of the other thing that's really interesting, how easy it is to use. And one of the stories I tell is a few years ago, I was visiting my parents. I've probably told you this before, Teresa, but they've been married for over 60 years, right? And I thought they were going to get divorced because they were fighting all the time. And my mother would say something to my dad, and my dad would just completely ignore her, and that would get her angry. Or my dad would ask my mom to do something, and she would like do something exactly the opposite of whatever he asked. And it was just because they couldn't hear each other. So I showed them this tool. I did it myself because I have mild hearing loss in one ear. They both took the test. Guess what? They both had hearing loss. My mom now has hearing aids, and my dad is getting set to get his now too. And they have stayed married ever since. So thank you on behalf of my parents and my family. You kept my parents' marriage together. So
That's
it's
great.
terrific. Now, in this, I want to say thank you to Teresa and thank you to Larissa. One of the things we would love to have you do is to complete this short needs assessment, which will give us a little bit of information about what it is that you might need to be able to progress in your lives. And you can see, if you can't use the QR code, the way you can do that is just hold your phone camera up to it, and it should be able to let you link to it. Or we will put that link for the redcap.link, etc., into the chat. And what we're looking for here is the needs that you might have to be able to help people transition into long-term care, so that we can develop the right kinds of educational tools that we may not have out there. So we think that this is something that will be really helpful for us. Okay. And at this point, I think we are ready for a short bio break. I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so you can come back in 9 minutes. Come back at 3:25. You can go grab some water, take a walk around. We do know the longer you're sitting and not moving, that is a risk factor for dementia. So one of our guests on our exercise podcast recommends every half hour, get up and walk around. So you can do that right now. Go shake things, and there you go. So we'll see you back here at 3:25 for Q&A. And please remember to use the Q&A button to be able to ask us questions. Thanks so much. Hope you had a great little break. I walked around, I did some squats, I did some push-ups on the counter. Got my blood going. Okay, I think we're still waiting for, there's Teresa, and we're just waiting for Larissa. There she is. Welcome back, everybody. So glad to have you back. Did you have a good break, everyone? Yeah. Maybe you can unmute yourselves and I can ask some questions. While we're waiting for questions in the Q&A, there aren't any questions there yet that we haven't answered already. I wonder, Adriana, if I can start with you, because one of the questions that had come up before was, to what extent does the kind of thing that you were talking about a transition to long-term care, apply to someone who might be going to assisted living or even just an independent seniors residential setting?
So there are some differences in that retirement homes are different than long-term care in that the waiting list aren't as long to get in. And by virtue of making a decision and being able to implement that soon after, you feel a little bit more in control of the decision. Also, most retirement homes do not accept people that have dementia. And so the situations may be very different. There are now more retirement homes that are taking people with dementia, and so the situations are similar. The dynamic of guilt is there no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the piece to remember, is that whether it's by choice, and the choice is not because I don't want this person in my life anymore. The choice is because you can no longer provide the care the person needs. The difficulty with dementia is that things fluctuate. And some people have good days. And when we have a good day and you get a bed, or the day of the admission, the person seems more coherent or more in charge or different, you doubt yourself. And so this is why it's so helpful to ask professionals, to ask friends, to ask others, to kind of be that person for you that reminds you of you're doing the right thing. Of course, if the person doesn't have dementia and they're capable, it should be their decision why they're going in. So the dynamics are different.
Yeah, but even in the case where someone doesn't have dementia and it may not mean that they can live on their own, because there may be physical issues. So, often you'll hear someone has a frailty or is unable to operate, the kitchen appliances or something, or to clean themselves. And so there could be other issues, right? It's not just dementia.
Absolutely. The difference is, in those situations, the person is aware of the admission, so the resident going in, whether they like it or not, they've come, I can't even say they've come to terms, but at least they're accepting for now that this is where they need to be. And so it's different for the family caregiver when the person makes the decision or it's okay with it. You don't have the same level of guilt that you had to put somebody in a facility. Right. Even though you don't put them. The thing to remember is the dementia or the illness is what's making it happen. And it's really important to differentiate the two.
Yeah, I think it's also really important for people to understand that it's not a punishment, right? It's helping your loved one live their best possible life and get the care that they need. And it then will help you live your best possible life, right?
And just a quick anecdote. My father-in-law had dementia years ago, and he, at the end of it, needed to go to long-term care. He was always somebody that had depression and never a happy person. I kid you not. After the period of adjustment, he got the right medication and the right supports to be the best self. And my children grew up then with a grandfather who was depressed, who became the life of the party in the nursing home. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's everybody's experience, but a lot of people's experience is such that when they have the supports and people around them, they can be themselves. And so it's not a negative experience for everybody. And in fact, it's a good one for many people.
Yeah, and that's true whether it's long-term care or a retirement home. My mother-in-law just moved into a seniors residence, not a assisted living, not a long-term care. she is happier than ever, and she's got more friends. She's taken up, old hobbies and learning new hobbies, and she's more social than she ever has been. And she doesn't have to cook for herself, which is
Mm.
always nice to have someone else cook for you. One question, a really good one that came in doing this brain health assessment. Um, we talked about maybe do it every 6 months, and if you can keep track of it. Do you see an advantage there of using the cognicity test to be able to um, know, like keep track, because it keeps your scores, right? So you
Yeah.
can see over time, and if you're not sure or your loved one isn't sure, what's the advantage of having your information from that cognicity test?
Exactly. So it does keep your scores, and you can track them, and it's recommended every 6 months. But if you are declining, it's an indicator then to go talk to your doctor, your family doctor, if something's happening. We did just a study to look at our smart tracker scores, and they actually correlate with brain health assessment. So the better you are, the higher score you have on the
Yeah.
dementia risk assessment, the lower or the better your brain health score is. So it tells you maybe step up, do these things that are modifiable, all the modifiable risk factors for dementia. So it's sort of nice to see and keep track every 6 months or as often as you'd like. We do recommend every 6 months. But if there is a decline, it sort of rings the alarms to say, yeah, go talk to your doctor. It could be mild cognitive impairment, it could be dementia, it could be other
Right.
things, but
Right.
do keep it in check.
Right. And I guess I'm thinking also from this perspective of like, what if, one child thinks it is time and another thinks it's not time? If everyone here on this webinar, all of us are taking the brain health assessment all the time, right? Then there's some information that we all have and we can share. So, and that's the other real advantage of it. Just a reminder to people, if you have questions, please just enter them into the Q&A. We're open to any questions. In the meantime, Teresa, uh, from the hearing perspective, I know one of the concerns I've heard people talk about is, well, my loved one doesn't hear so well. And so I'm afraid if I put them into, or if the dementia puts them into, as Adriana said, a long-term care home, will they be able to communicate the right way, with the nurses and doctors, or, because sometimes families learn different ways of interpreting what someone is saying and somebody's behavior. So do you see any issues with that in terms of, hearing?
Yeah, for sure. Like as you mentioned, like oftentimes family members like find their own way to communicate with them. And also like they're familiar conversational partners. So like they are more like the person um maybe more accustomed to their family member's voice versus like in a nursing care home setting, there may be people with different ways of like like volume wise, like speaking and speaking rate. A lot of the times we say that, a very good strategy is to speak slower, and that automatically makes speech clearer. But it doesn't always happen when people talk to each other. So yeah, the screening tool there gives a very good opportunity for like, let's say a family member, a family has someone who is going to these settings. Sometimes we might not always be like be thinking of like checking our hearing. That might not be something that we think about a lot, but yeah, doing this screening tool gives you an information, like a general information where it's at, and it also prompts you to take action about it because if there may be hearing loss, then it's recommended to go for further testing, and from there, the audiologist can talk about the options to manage, um, like the options to like manage hearing loss and like maybe some devices to help them transition into that setting a little better with some communication support there.
Yeah. And what challenges are there in assessing hearing for people with mild cognitive impairment or dementia?
Mm. So I myself, I'm not the audiologist to conduct those assessments, but I do know that we like our patient population there has like we do have patients with mild cognitive impairments, and so like if you could come in for a test, a lot of the times, what I see is like patients would come in with a family member as well. And then so the family member may be able to support the process, the assessment. But yeah, so I personally, I can't really, I don't really have much information on to comment on that, but we do have certain population and yeah, family member support is often one to help with that.
Right. The hearing assessment tool, the screening tool that you
Oh,
showed us,
mhm,
probably isn't the best for somebody to do on their own
mhm. So yeah.
if they have advanced dementia, but there's other ways of testing the hearing,
Mm-hmm,
right?
Yeah, so that one, for example, if you're doing it from home, like someone may be able to assist. And if it's showing that you need further testing, then also there could be ways to navigate that situation as well.
Yeah, yeah. And this could be potentially one of the reasons that there's family discord, right? That one child might say, "Hey, uh, let's not take that offer of a long-term care placement," and not, someone else might say yes because they're really worried if there is hearing loss. So, Adriana, did you want to add anything on what to do in that case?
Sure. Family discord is common, and you shouldn't think that it's just your family who's struggling with adult children that don't see eye to eye. And generally, it's adult children when it comes to their parents. The difficulty also in our system is that we have, and each province has a different name for this, but what is called powers of attorney. And generally, there's one for personal care and one for finances. The difficulty sometimes is the way decisions are made when somebody has dementia and is incapable to make the decisions. A decision to place, say, a parent would be made by the child that has power of attorney for personal care. Sometimes you have another one that makes decisions for finances. And if the two of them don't agree, there's a problem because I may decide to place my mother, but my brother may decide I'm not paying for the long-term care facility. So that's one form. The other one is just, it's the bread and butter of social workers, families that disagree. And it is very common. And sometimes you have people, successful adults in your office fighting like 5-year-olds over the parents. Who's the better child? Who does mom love me most? Those are the dynamics that don't go away with parents that sometimes get carried away into making decisions. And so it's really important to seek help from a counselor, the Alzheimer's Society, Baycrest, any facility that deals with dementia will be able to help you, or use the CCAR tool to where to get help, because it's just mediating and helping people understand this is a very painful experience for families. And these are major decisions being made at a time of crisis. And with good communication, you can get through it. And even if I don't get along with my brother or my sister, we can all agree that we care about our mother's well-being. And that's a good place to start.
Yeah. So start where there's commonality. Yeah. That's always a good idea. One question that's come in is about advice you have for people who are going through transitions. What would your last words be? And we'll go in reverse order from how you entered. So Teresa first, and then Larissa, and then Adriana.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. It's been great having all these discussions. And so I think one thing about, like, especially for hearing, is the awareness. A lot of times is we don't know how, we don't know when. So here today, I think we talked about some really, really wonderful resources to identify and for support.
Great. Larissa?
I was just going to say, get your brain health checked. If you're a caregiver or spousal caregiver, you're at 6 times increased risk of developing dementia. So take it yourself if you're a caregiver, and just keep that brain checked out. So
Great. And last word, Adriana?
Give yourself some grace. It is your experience too that your person's entering a long-term care. It is a crisis for most people. And so be kind with yourself.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. And speaking of resources, I want to draw everyone's attention to all of the resources that are on the Defy Dementia website. You can get all of those at defydementia.org. And if you want resources for sleep, click on the sleep episode. If you want resources for caregivers, click on that. Check them all out. There's tons and tons of resources. You can also get information on the chat, all the different links of some of the things we talked about, including a brain health game that we co-created with the amazing and creative folks who created a game called Knuckle. We created a brain health version of Sudoku with them, so take a look at that. And if you can, we would love for you to, in the Q&A, just share with us one reflection on one thing that you learned and one action that you plan to take. And I just want to remind everyone also that an evaluation is going to pop up at the end of this webinar, and it will also be emailed to you, and we will share all of the additional resources with you, also using the email address that you registered for today's events, including a link to the recorded version of the webinar. So final thank yous are thank you to Adriana, Larissa, Teresa, to the whole Defy Dementia team, including my co-host, Jay Ingram, and especially to Roseanne Aliong, Katerina Nemeth, Kim Krzyzanowski, Natalie Leventhal, Sophie Boisvert, and Sylvain de Broca, who are all with us today coordinating this event, as well as to Ben Schaub, who helps make everything possible for us at Defy Dementia. And thank you most importantly to all of you for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.